Negotiations were supposed to end in silence. Instead, the translator was screaming. Ambassador Reyes Okonkwo-Lin stood very still in the center of the Vael delegation chamber, watching the creature-designated third voice convulse against its restraint harness, its 4 eyes rolling independently in their sockets while its vocal bladder shrieked a frequency that made the human security detail clap hands over ears. 40 seconds ago, this had been a routine trade clarification. Now a Vael diplomat was dying on the floor of a ship that belonged to nobody's government, 3 hours before the ceasefire vote that would decide whether 11 billion humans got to keep their solar system. Reyes did not move toward the dying alien. She moved toward the door. Ambassador, her aide, Priya, grabbed her sleeve. "We can't just leave him." "He's not dying because we hurt him," Reyes said, low and fast. "He's dying because someone wants it to look like we did. Get me Fleet Liaison Aiken now, and get a hard lock on every recording device in this room before that footage leaves the ship." 2 unanswered questions hung in the air with the dying alien's shrieks. Who had poisoned third voice, and why now? 3 hours before the vote that would either end the war or restart it at full scale. Then the chamber lights flickered, and a voice that did not belong to any human or any Vael crackled through the intercom. "This session is terminated. The human delegation is in violation of Compact Article 9. All parties will await tribunal." Reyes felt the floor of her certainty drop out from under her. 3 hours. And someone had just turned a dying alien into a verdict already written. 6 hours earlier, the war had still made sense. Humanity had lost it. That part wasn't in dispute by anyone, least of all the people who'd fought it. 3 systems gone, the Mariana colony glassed in an afternoon, 11% of Earth's population displaced or worse. The Vael Compact hadn't wanted Earth's resources or its people. They'd wanted Earth's silence, proof that humans, having tasted real interstellar violence, would learn to behave like every other species the Compact had folded into its order, quietly, permanently, gratefully. What nobody on the Vael side had predicted was that humanity would lose the war and then refuse to lose the argument. Reyes had been a labor mediator before the invasion, 22 years pulling exhausted union reps and furious plant managers back from the edge of walkouts that would have starved both sides. She had never fired a weapon. She had also never, not once in 22 years, lost a negotiation she was willing to stay in the room for. When the provisional government needed someone to lead the ceasefire talks, 3 different generals had vetoed her. The Vael themselves had requested her by name. That alone should have told her something. Now she stood in the observation gallery above the negotiation deck of the Hollow Accord, a neutral station built by a third species, the Mthuli, who profited from everyone else's wars without fighting any of them. Through the viewport she could see Earth as a blue smear too far away to be comforting. Beside her, Fleet Liaison Aiken Vascazobi chewed a stim tab and watched the Vael delegation file in below, 7 members, segmented bodies under draped silver cloth, moving with the unhurried confidence of a species that had never needed to hurry. "They brought third voice," Aiken said. "That's new. Why's that matter?" "Third voice doesn't negotiate. Third voice judges." Aiken's jaw tightened. "He's Compact Internal Affairs. If they brought a judge to a ceasefire talk, somebody on their side already thinks we're guilty of something." Reyes filed that away the way she filed every uncomfortable fact, not as fear, but as material. "Then let's find out what, before they do." She did not yet know that within the hour, that very alien would be dead on the chamber floor, and that the word guilty would stop being a hypothetical. The session opened the way all 4 previous sessions had, with ritual, with the slow unspooling of formal Vael grievance, translated through bone conduction implants into a flat synthetic voice that stripped all the venom out of words and left only their shape. Reyes had learned to read the venom anyway, in the angle of segmented shoulders, the rhythm of breathing slits opening and closing. "The Compact acknowledges human persistence," said the lead negotiator, an elder Vael called Second Bloom, "as it acknowledges the persistence of mold. Persistence is not virtue. It is merely the failure to die on schedule." Beside Reyes, Priya stiffened. Reyes did not. She had heard worse from steelworkers about to lose their pensions. "We're not here to discuss virtue," Reyes said. "We're here to discuss terms under which your fleet stops moving towards Seoul and ours stops dying to stop you. Everything else is theater, and I don't charge by the hour for theater." A pause. Translated laughter from the Vael side sounded like static. "You speak as though terms exist that could satisfy both sides equally." "They never do," Reyes said. "That's not the bar. The bar is terms that hurt both sides equally little. I've never once in my life gotten a room to agree on what's fair. I've gotten plenty of rooms to agree on what's survivable." It was here, 4 sessions deep into a negotiation that the rest of humanity believed was about reparations and borderlines, that third voice had finally spoken, his first words in the entire process. "Survivable," he repeated, his synthetic voice carrying none of the other's contempt, something colder instead. "You assume survival is the variable in question, Ambassador. It is not. The variable in question is whether your species can be trusted with the knowledge that it survived." Reyes felt the room shift. Aiken's hand drifted, almost involuntarily, toward where a sidearm would have been if anyone were allowed weapons on the hollow accord. "Meaning what, exactly?" Reyes said. "Meaning the Compact has fought 11 prior wars of correction," third voice said. "In 9 of them, the corrected species, once it understood it could not win by force, ceased fighting entirely, out of logic. In 1, the species was extinguished because it would not stop and could not adapt. You are the 11th case. You have neither stopped, nor have you escalated to the violence that would justify extinguishing you. You have done something we have no category for. That is why I am here. Not to negotiate. To determine which of our existing categories you most dangerously resemble." The micro-mystery Reyes had been chasing for 4 sessions cracked open into something far larger and far more dangerous. This had never been a peace talk. It was a classification hearing, and humanity's actual fate hung on a label none of them had been told they were applying for. She kept her face perfectly still, the same face she'd worn across a table from men who wanted to break a union and didn't know yet that she already knew their numbers better than they did. "Then let's talk about which category we resemble," she said. "Because I don't think you know yet either. That's why you're still talking instead of glassing the rest of our planet." Third voice sighs, all 4 of them, turned on her at once. "Careful, Ambassador. That is a perceptive observation. Perceptive observations, in my experience, are rarely safe to make aloud." 40 minutes later, he was dead, and the chamber lights were screaming red, and a voice with no face attached to it was accusing Earth of murdering the one Vael in the entire delegation who had been trying, in his cold and alien way, to understand them rather than condemn them. "Lockdown's holding," Priya said, breathless, jogging beside Reyes through the hollow Accord's narrow gray corridor. "Footage is sealed on our end, but the Vael delegation's already broadcasting their own feed system-wide. Compact Fleet Command has it. So does every news relay from here to Mars." "What does their feed show?" Priya's silence was answer enough. "Show me," Reyes said. Priya's tablet displayed a clip already racing across 2 solar systems worth of panicked relay nodes, third voice convulsing, and standing just behind him in frame, close enough to seem complicit, Reyes herself, frozen for one terrible half-second in an expression that, out of context, could read as anything from horror to satisfaction. "That's not what happened," Priya said. "You went toward him for 2 steps before I pulled you back. You were trying to help." "It doesn't matter what happened," Reyes said, and heard the brittleness under her own calm and hated it. "It matters what the footage shows a species that's already decided we're vermin. Where's Fleet Liaison Aiken? Trying to get the original autopsy data before the Compact's medical team controls the body. Get me there. Now." They found Aiken in the hollow Accord's neutral medical bay, arguing, quietly, dangerously, with a Philly station administrator whose entire torso was a writhing column of feeding tendrils that somehow still managed to convey bureaucratic exhaustion. "They want the body off station within the hour," Aiken said without turning around. Compact jurisdiction claim. Once it's gone, there's no independent toxicology. There's just their story. Then we don't let it leave, Reyes said. It's not our station to make that call on, Aiken snapped, frustration cracking through for the first time since Reyes had met him. We are guests here, same as them. Them fully profit off both sides hating each other forever. You think they're going to risk that by taking our side? This was the first plan to fail in real time, in front of her, the assumption that neutral ground meant fair ground. It did not. It meant ground owned by a third party with its own incentives, and those incentives did not include the survival of humanity's credibility. Reyes turned to the Mthuli administrator. Up close, its feeding tendrils carried a faint chemical scent like burnt sugar, something she'd learn later was the Mthuli equivalent of stress sweat. What's the toxin? She said. It wasn't a question. The administrator's translated voice was reedy, uninflected. Preliminary scan, a compound consistent with, a pause, almost reluctant, your delegation's on-board medical stores. The room went very quiet. That's not possible, Reyes said. Our medical stores have triple custody locks. No single person on our delegation can access them alone. And yet, the administrator said, the compound's signature matches. The compact has already filed this finding with their tribunal request. I am required to note it for the record. Priya's face had gone the color of old paper. Aiken's jaw worked like he was chewing on something that wouldn't go down. Reyes felt the second piece of the conflict visibility puzzle click into place, a misunderstanding, or worse, a manufactured certainty that had already caused real damage 3 hours before the vote, with the tribunal now circling like it had been waiting for exactly this excuse. I want every name with access to triple lock custody, she said. I want it in the next 10 minutes. And I want to know who benefits if the ceasefire vote fails tonight. Aiken looked at her with something between alarm and the beginning of respect. You think this was sabotage? Internal. I think, Reyes said, that nobody kills the one alien in the room who was trying to understand us 3 hours before a vote, by accident. There were 6 names on the triple lock access list. Reyes interviewed all 6 in 40 minutes, in a cramped supply room that smelled of recycled air and ozone, with Aiken standing in the corner like a man trying not to be seen having a crisis of faith. 5 of the 6 were exactly who they appeared to be, exhausted, terrified, telling the truth in the particular unpolished way of people who had never expected to be suspects. The 6th was a junior logistics officer named Dorian Achebe-Friel, 26 years old, 3 days into his first off-world posting, and the only one of the 6 who answered every question a half-second too fast, with answers that fit too neatly, like a man who had rehearsed. You weren't on the duty roster for medical access that shift, Reyes said quietly. I checked. So why did the lock log show your credential being used at 0411? Dorian's composure didn't crack. That was the composure that perfect, in a 26-year-old facing a murder accusation, was itself a kind of evidence. I was covering for someone. Who? A long pause. I can't say. You understand, Reyes said, leaning forward, voice dropping to the register she used to use on plant managers 3 minutes from walking out of a deal, that if you don't give me a name, every ounce of suspicion in this room lands on you, and through you, on 11 billion people who are about to find out whether the Vael decide we're a species worth talking to or a problem worth erasing. So I am going to ask you one more time, and I want you to think very hard about whose interests you're protecting and whether they're worth that weight. Dorian's hands, folded on the table, began to shake. It's not. I didn't poison anyone. I swear to you, I didn't. I gave my credential to someone because they told me it was for a supply audit. I didn't think. Who? Colonel Reyes Okonkwo-Lin. The name came out of him like something physically painful. Provisional Government Liaison. He told me it was routine. He told me. Dorian's voice cracked. He told me the war wasn't actually going to end tonight regardless of what happened in that room, that the real fight was about who controlled the peace afterward, and that some people back home didn't want it to end at all. Not like this. Not with you as the one who ended it. It was the emotional breakdown the moment demanded, raw and unrehearsed, and Reyes let it happen without flinching, because flinching now would cost her the only honest sentence anyone had said to her in 6 hours. Somewhere on Earth, someone in her own government, someone who profited from the war continuing, had decided that a dead alien and a discredited ambassador was an acceptable price for sabotaging the peace. That was the escalation, local sabotage, suddenly revealed as something system-wide. Not an alien plot. A human one, wearing the war's ending as a knife. She had 90 minutes before the tribunal vote. She used the first 10 to do something that made Aiken physically grab her arm. You want to do what? I want to request a private audience with Second Bloom, Reyes said. Before the tribunal convenes. Alone. They'll never grant it. And if they do, it's a trap. You'd be walking into the delegation that just accused us of murder, with 0 witnesses, 0 recording, completely exposed. I know, Reyes said. Then why? Because every move we've made tonight has been reactive, Reyes said, and for the first time, the fear she'd been holding behind 22 years of professional calm leaked into her voice, just slightly, just enough that Aiken actually heard it. We've been answering accusations instead of making the case we came here to make. The Compact thinks we're either vermin that should have quit, or a threat that needs erasing. There's a third option they haven't considered, and I am not going to get them to consider it from behind a defense table in a tribunal designed by people who already decided the verdict. And if Second Bloom kills you the second the door closes? Then you'll have the only piece of leverage left, Reyes said. A dead human ambassador requesting peaceful audience, murdered on neutral ground, 3 hours after their own internal affairs officer died under circumstances they can't fully explain either. That's not nothing, Aiken. I'd rather it not come to that. But I need you to let me try the version of this where it doesn't. He didn't agree. He simply, finally, stopped arguing, which from a career fleet officer about to watch a civilian walk unarmed into an alien delegation's quarters, was its own kind of trust earned in a corridor with 80 minutes left on the clock. Second Bloom received her alone, as requested, in a chamber lit dim amber, the air thick with a mineral smell like wet stone. The elder Vael's segmented body was coiled in something between a chair and a nest, for breathing slits working slow and steady. You requested this audience without escort, Second Bloom said. Either you trust us more than your liaison advised, or you have nothing left to lose. Both, Reyes said. Mostly the second one. You did not kill Third Voice. It wasn't a question, and it landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Reyes kept her face neutral through years of practice, though her pulse spiked. You know that. I have known it since the footage was released, Second Bloom said. The toxin compound, while matched to your stores, metabolizes incorrectly for a substance stolen and administered in the time frame your own logs suggest. Our forensics team noted the discrepancy within the first 20 minutes. I have not corrected the tribunal's framing of it. Reyes felt something cold settle in her chest. Not surprise, exactly. Confirmation of a thing she'd already half suspected. Why not? Because Third Voice death is, regardless of its cause, useful, Second Bloom said, with the flat honesty of a species that had never needed to lie to itself about its own cruelty. He believed your species belonged in a category we have never used. He was building a case for it. His death, blamed on you, ends that case before it can be heard. There are members of the Compact who find that outcome convenient. So you're going to let an innocent species take the fall for a murder, to bury an argument you're afraid might be true. I did not say I was afraid it was true, Second Bloom said, and something in the rhythm of its breathing slits shifted, slowed. I said it was inconvenient. Those are not the same accusation, Ambassador, though I understand why your species would conflate them. This was the moment the negotiation actually began, not the formal sessions, not the tribunal, but this, two beings, alone, in a dim room, each holding a piece of a truth the other needed. Then let me make the argument myself, Reyes said. The one he was building. Tell me what category he thought we belonged in, and let me tell you why he was right, and why letting that argument die with him is going to cost the compact a great deal more than it saves you. Second Bloom was silent for a long moment, the alien equivalent, Reyes would later guess, of genuine surprise. You assume I will tell you, it said. I assume, Reyes said, that you let me into this room alone, unwatched, off any record, specifically because some part of you wanted exactly this conversation to happen, and wanted no one above you to know it happened until it was already too late to stop. The breathing slits stilled entirely for 3 full seconds. Then, slowly, they resumed. Third voice hypothesis, Second Bloom said, was that your species does not, in fact, value survival above all else, as every prior species we have corrected eventually proved to. He believed you value something else more, something that made you fight on long after fighting stopped being rational, and that same trait would make you negotiate honestly even after you'd lost every reason to trust us. He called it, in our closest translation, the refusal to let the story end badly. He believed it was not weakness. He believed it might be the only trait in the galaxy more dangerous and more valuable than raw force. Reyes felt the philosophical core of the entire night crystallize in that sentence, and understood, with sudden total clarity, exactly what argument she needed to make and exactly how little time she had left to make it. He was right, she said quietly. And I can prove it to your whole tribunal in less than an hour, if you let me. The tribunal chamber, when she walked back into it with 11 minutes to spare before the vote, was not the gallery of the earlier negotiation sessions. It was larger, harsher lit, ringed with representatives from species Reyes had never seen, 6-limbed compact magistrates, observer drones from neutral systems, and at the center, a holographic seal that would, the moment the vote concluded, either lift the compact fleet's advance on Sol or accelerate it to total war. Aiken met her eyes from across the room, a question in his face she answered with the smallest nod. I'm still standing. Trust the next 10 minutes. The presiding magistrate, not Second Bloom, who sat silent among the delegation, betraying nothing, opened the session with the same cold formality that had governed every prior hour. The matter before this tribunal, whether the human delegation, through act or negligence, caused the death of Compact Officer Third Voice, and whether this act constitutes sufficient grounds to classify the human species as category hostile unrepentant, triggering immediate and total military correction. Category hostile unrepentant. The word landed in the chamber like a verdict already written, exactly as Reyes had feared since the chamber lights first turned red. Before this tribunal votes, Reyes said, stepping forward without waiting to be invited, I'd like to enter new evidence. A ripple of translated murmurs. The presiding magistrate's many small eyes fixed on her. This tribunal is not a negotiation, Ambassador. I know, Reyes said. I've stopped trying to negotiate the verdict. I'm here to correct the premise. She turned, not to the magistrate, but to the full ring of delegates, every species in that chamber, and let 22 years of standing in rooms that wanted to write her off carry her voice across it. You believe Third Voice died because my species is dangerous and dishonest. I am telling you he died because my species, for the first time in this entire war, was finally being honestly heard, and someone on my side found that more dangerous than anything you could do to us. She produced the recording Priya had pulled from the supply room interview, Dorian's broken confession, the name Colonel Becky Holt, the motive laid bare, a faction back on Earth that wanted the war to continue, because peace under Reyes's terms meant losing power they'd built fighting it. This was not a compact versus human crime, Reyes said. This was a human crime, committed by a human who feared peace more than he feared losing the war, against the one compact official willing to consider that we were more than vermin or threat. He is, as of 9 minutes ago, in fleet custody on our side, and every record of this is now part of your tribunal's evidence, freely given, because we would rather you judge us honestly and harshly than have you spare us based on a lie. It was the irreversible loss made plain in the room, not third voice death alone, but the death of the easy narrative everyone, on every side, had been ready to believe. The presiding magistrate's translated voice carried, for the first time, something that wasn't quite cold. You are presenting evidence that damages your own delegation's credibility. I'm presenting the truth, Reyes said, because third voice believed something about my species that I think this whole compact has been too afraid to test. He thought we don't value survival above all else. He thought we value not letting the story end badly, even when it costs us. I just handed you proof of a man on my own side, willing to sabotage everything, including his own species' survival, to control how this story ended. And I just handed you proof of the opposite trait too, because I could have buried that recording. It would have been easier. It would have kept us alive longer in this room. I didn't, because the version of humanity that wins by lying to you isn't a version worth saving. The chamber held a silence Reyes had learned, across 2 decades of negotiation tables, to recognize as the specific quiet of people recalculating everything they thought they knew. It was Second Bloom who finally spoke, rising from stillness for the first time since Reyes had walked back into the room. This tribunal was convened to determine classification, it said. I move that we reclassify. Not hostile unrepentant. Not vermin persistent. A pause, and in that pause, Reyes felt the entire weight of the war's ending balance on a word she had never heard before tonight. Category witness-bound. A species that does not fight merely to survive, nor merely to win, but to ensure its own story is told honestly, even to its cost. Third voice proposed this classification 4 hours before his death. I move this tribunal honor the work he died attempting, regardless of who killed him. The vote that followed was not unanimous. Nothing in that war had ever been unanimous, but it carried, 17-9, with 3 abstentions, and the holographic seal at the chamber's center shifted from red to a slow, uncertain amber that meant, for the first time in 3 years, that the compact fleet bearing down on Seoul had been ordered to hold position pending formal peace negotiation under the new classification. It was not victory. Reyes understood that even as relief broke something loose in her chest that she didn't let show on her face until she was 3 corridors away, alone, with Aiken's hand steady on her shoulder and Priya quietly crying against the wall. It was not the end of the war, or even certainly the beginning of its end. It was a reclassification, a label that bought time, that opened a door which a single sabotage session could still slam shut, that meant nothing without 100 more rooms like this one, fought just as hard for years. But it was the first time in the entire war that a Vael official had stood in front of his own people and argued that humanity's stubbornness was not a flaw to be corrected, but a trait worth understanding. We were wrong, Second Bloom told her quietly, before the delegation departed the Hollow Accord, about what made your species dangerous. We assumed it was your capacity for violence. It was never that. It was that you would rather lose, honestly, than win on a lie, and a species like that cannot be taught to quit, because quitting was never the thing it was afraid of losing. Reyes thought of Dorian's shaking hands, of Colonel Beckyholt's name spoken like a wound, of the 11 billion people on a blue smear of a planet who would wake up tomorrow to a war that hadn't ended but had, for the first time, been honestly seen. Then let's make sure, she said, that the next room proves you right again. She did not know, standing in that gray corridor with her hands finally steady, whether the peace would hold. She knew only that for the first time since the war began, the compact had stopped asking how to make humanity quiet, and started asking, instead, what it would take to actually listen. That, she thought, was a story worth telling honestly, however it ended.